And Elena stood alone in the equipment room, her emotions a tangled mess of frustration, anger, and something else she refused to name. Something that felt dangerously like the flutter of old attraction she'd spent years trying to forget. This was going to be the longest 6 months of her life. Elena couldn't sleep. After hours of tossing and turning, replaying every argument with Marcus, she finally gave up and pulled on a sweatshirt and jeans. The beach called to her, it always had when her mind was too loud. The facility sat on a private stretch of coastline, and at 2 in the morning, Elena had the sand entirely to herself. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the waves. She walked along the water's edge, letting the cold Pacific foam wash over her bare feet, trying to clear her head. That's when she saw the glow. At first, she thought it was bioluminescence in the water, but as she moved closer, she realized the light was coming from someone, partially hidden behind a cluster of rocks. Elena approached cautiously, her scientific curiosity overriding her sense of self-preservation. When she rounded the rocks, she froze. A woman sat on the sand, but she was unlike anyone Elena had ever seen. Her skin was a deep, luminous purple that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. She wore something that looked like fabric but moved like liquid, and her eyes, large and iridescent, fixed on Elena with a mixture of fear and hope. "Please," the woman said, her voice musical and strange. "I need help. My pod crashed. I can't return without repairs." Elena's rational mind tried to process what she was seeing. This had to be a hallucination. Maybe she'd inhaled something toxic in the lab. Maybe this was an elaborate prank. But the woman's expression was too genuine, too desperate to be fake. "Who are you?" Elena managed. "My name is Lyra. I'm from Valora, a world far from here. I'm a scientist, like you. I've been studying your ocean ecosystems, but my observation pod malfunctioned and crashed into the water near your facility." "You're an alien." "Yes." Elena sat down heavily on the sand, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Okay, this is happening. There's a purple alien on the beach telling me she crashed her spaceship." "Not a spaceship. An observation pod. My ship is in orbit." Lyra moved closer, and Elena could see the concern in her unusual features. "I know this is shocking. But I need help retrieving my equipment before anyone else discovers it. The technology could be dangerous in the wrong hands." "Where did you crash?" "Approximately half a mile offshore, in about 80 feet of water." Elena's scientific mind started working despite her shock. "That's within diving range. But I'd need help with the recovery." "The equipment." "Elena?" She spun around to find Marcus standing 20 feet away, a device in his hand that looked like some kind of scanner. He was staring not at her, but at Lyra. "Marcus, I can explain." "You're Valerian," Marcus said to Lyra, his voice calm. "I recognize the bioluminescent patterns in your skin. What are you doing here?" Lyra stood slowly. "You know my people? I've been consulting with the Intergalactic Environmental Council for 2 years. They approached me after reading my research on coral symbiosis." Marcus finally looked at Elena, and for once, there was no challenge in his gaze. Only concern. "Are you alright?" "Am I alright?" "Marcus, there's an alien on the beach." "I know. I've been tracking unusual energy signatures all evening. That's why I came down here." He turned back to Lyra. "Your pod crashed?" "Yes. The equipment is underwater, and I can't retrieve it alone. Earth's atmospheric pressure affects my physiology." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he looked at Elena. "We need to recover it before the morning shift starts. If anyone else discovers alien technology, it could cause an international incident." Elena laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "Are you seriously suggesting we go on a midnight dive to recover a crashed alien observation pod?" Do you have a better idea? I have about 1,000 questions, starting with why you never mentioned you were working with aliens. He turned back to Lyra. Your pod crashed? Yes. The equipment is underwater, and I can't retrieve it alone. Earth's atmospheric pressure affects my physiology. Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he looked at Elena. We need to recover it before the morning shift starts. If anyone else discovers alien technology, it could cause an international incident. Elena laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Are you seriously suggesting we go on a midnight dive to recover a crashed alien observation pod? Do you have a better idea? I have about 1,000 questions, starting with why you never mentioned you were working with aliens. It's classified. And technically, I'm still not supposed to tell you. Marcus met her eyes. But I need your help. Lyra needs your help. Can we table our differences for a few hours? Elena looked at Lyra, who was watching them both with interest. Despite everything, the impossibility, the shock, the fact that her worldview had just been completely upended, Elena found herself nodding. Fine. But you're going to explain everything once we're done. Deal. They returned to the facility and gathered diving equipment, moving quickly and quietly to avoid waking anyone. Lyra provided coordinates for her pod's location, and within an hour, Elena and Marcus were in a small boat heading offshore. The dive itself was surreal. Elena had done hundreds of night dives, but never with her ex-rival and never to recover alien technology. Marcus moved through the water with practiced ease, and despite herself, Elena found herself admiring his skill. They found Lyra's pod nestled in a kelp forest, its metallic surface covered in bioluminescent markings. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Working together, they attached flotation devices and carefully guided it to the surface. That was incredible, Lyra said when they finally returned to shore, her equipment safely hidden in a cave Elena knew from her research surveys. You worked together perfectly. We're professionals, Marcus said, but his eyes met Elena's, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or the beginning of something that felt dangerously like partnership. Elena looked away first, confused by the warmth spreading through her chest. This changed nothing between them. But somehow, she knew that was a lie. Over the next 3 days, Elena and Marcus worked together to repair Lyra's observation pod. They converted an unused storage room into a makeshift lab, telling the other researchers they were working on a classified equipment calibration project. It wasn't entirely untrue. Lyra proved to be a fascinating companion. She asked endless questions about human behavior, particularly about the dynamic between Elena and Marcus. Your conflict patterns are unusual, Lyra observed one evening as Elena soldered a connection on the pod's navigation system. You argue, but your physiological responses indicate attraction rather than genuine hostility. Elena's hand slipped, nearly burning herself. That's not, we don't. Your heart rate increases when he enters the room. Your pupils dilate when you look at him. On my world, these are clear indicators of mating interest. We're not interested in mating, Elena said firmly, her cheeks burning. Marcus chose that moment to enter the lab, carrying coffee for all 3 of them. Who's not interested in mating? No one, Elena said quickly. Lyra was just explaining Valerian reproduction. Very fascinating. Completely different from humans. Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't push. He set down the coffee and examined their progress on the pod. The power core is almost fully charged. Another few days and Lyra should be able to return to her ship. Something twisted in Elena's chest at the thought of Lyra leaving. In just a few days, the alien scientist had become a friend. More than that, she'd become a mirror, reflecting truths Elena wasn't ready to face. I'll miss you both, Lyra said softly, as if reading Elena's thoughts. Studying humans from a distance is nothing compared to knowing you personally. Your capacity for emotion is remarkable. Even the negative emotions? Marcus asked with a slight smile. Especially those. You feel everything so deeply. Love, anger, grief, joy, they consume you in ways my people can't fully comprehend. Lyra looked between them. That's why your conflict fascinates me. You're not really fighting about research methods or professional rivalry. You're fighting because you don't know how to express what you truly feel. An uncomfortable silence fell over the lab. Elena busied herself with checking connections she'd already checked twice. Marcus suddenly became very interested in his coffee. The next morning, they had to make another dive to retrieve additional components from the crash site. The ocean was rougher than usual, with a storm system moving in from the west. Dr. Chen advised them to postpone, but the weather window. Elena Russo stood at the entrance of the Monterey Coastal Research Facility, salt air whipping her dark hair around her face as she stared at the building that would be her home for the next 6 months. This project was everything she'd worked toward, a comprehensive study of deep-sea coral restoration that could revolutionize marine conservation. She'd beaten out dozens of candidates for this position. Nothing could ruin this moment. Dr. Russo. Welcome to Monterey. Elena turned at the voice and felt her stomach drop. Dr. Marcus Kane stood in the doorway, tall and infuriatingly composed in his white lab coat, his green eyes holding that same intense focus she remembered from graduate school. His dark blonde hair was shorter now, but everything else about him, the sharp intelligence in his gaze, the set of his jaw, the way he seemed to command any space he occupied, was exactly as she remembered. You, she managed, her voice flat with disbelief. Me, Marcus confirmed, his expression unreadable. I'm heading the coral restoration project. Didn't they tell you? No. They definitely did not tell me that. Elena felt anger rising in her chest. I was told Dr. Hammond was leading this research. Dr. Hammond retired last month. I was brought in as his replacement. Marcus stepped aside to let her enter. I hope that won't be a problem. Of course it's a problem, Elena snapped, following him inside despite every instinct telling her to leave. We spent 3 years in graduate school unable to agree on anything. You sabotaged my thesis presentation, remember? I didn't sabotage anything. I pointed out flaws in your methodology. During my defense. In front of the entire review board. Because your conclusions were based on incomplete data. Marcus led her down a hallway lined with aquariums glowing with bioluminescent specimens. If I hadn't challenged you then, you would have published something that could have damaged your credibility. Elena grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop and face her. You humiliated me because you couldn't stand that my research was getting more attention than yours. You always had to be the smartest person in the room. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, hurt, maybe, or anger. You think that's what it was about? What else could it have been? He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was fighting to keep words contained. Finally, he said, your lab is the third door on the left. Orientation meeting is at 6 in the conference room. Try to be on time. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Elena standing in the hallway with her fists clenched and her heart racing. Of all the researchers in the world, why did it have to be Marcus Kane? The orientation meeting was tense. Marcus presented the project scope with his characteristic precision, outlining research protocols and diving schedules. Elena sat across the table, challenging every point he made, unable to stop herself from falling into their old pattern of debate. The coral samples should be collected at dawn when polyp activity is highest, she argued. Evening collections will give us better data on nocturnal feeding patterns, Marcus countered. We're studying restoration, not feeding habits. Feeding directly impacts restoration success rates. They went back and forth until the other team members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Dr. Sarah Chen, the facility director, cleared her throat. Perhaps you two should work out your differences privately. The rest of us would like to actually start the project sometime this decade. Elena felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She was acting like a child, and she knew it. But something about Marcus brought out the worst in her, or maybe the most honest version of herself, the one who refused to back down from a fight. After the meeting, she found herself alone with Marcus in the equipment room, both of them checking diving gear for the next day's expedition. "We can't work together if you're going to question everything I say," Marcus said quietly, not looking at her as he inspected an oxygen tank. "And we can't work together if you're going to dismiss every suggestion I make," Elena replied, testing the seal on her dive mask. Marcus finally looked up, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I don't dismiss your suggestions, Elena. I never have. You're brilliant, and your research is exceptional. That's not what this is about." "Then what is it about?" He opened his mouth to answer, then seemed to think better of it. "Nothing. Forget it." He grabbed his gear and headed toward the door. "Meet me at the dock at 0600. Try not to be late." "I'm never late." "You were late to your own thesis defense. Because you stole my research notes the night before." Marcus paused at the door, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "I returned them, didn't I? 20 minutes before I had to present." He left without responding, and for the next week looked even worse. "We can handle it," Elena assured her. "We've both dived in worse conditions." Underwater, the current was stronger than anticipated. Elena and Marcus worked quickly, communicating through hand signals as they collected the scattered pieces of Lyra's technology. Elena was securing the last component when she noticed her air gauge dropping faster than it should. A leak. Small, but dangerous at this depth. She signaled to Marcus, pointing to her tank. His eyes widened behind his mask, and he immediately moved closer, sharing his secondary regulator with her. They began their ascent, but the current had other plans. A surge caught them both, slamming Elena into a rock formation. Pain exploded in her shoulder, and she felt her regulator slip from her mouth. Panic seized her as water flooded in, but then Marcus was there, his arms around her, his regulator pressed to her lips. He held her steady, breathing for both of them, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that had nothing to do with the dive. They surfaced together, gasping and coughing. Marcus kept one arm around her waist as they swam to the boat, refusing to let go even when they were safely aboard. "You scared the hell out of me," he said, his voice rough as he helped her out of her gear. "I'm fine. Just a bruised shoulder." "You could have drowned." "But I didn't. Because you were there." Elena met his eyes, and something shifted between them. "Thank you." Back at the facility, Marcus insisted on checking her shoulder in the medical bay. His touch was gentle as he examined the bruising, his fingers warm against her skin. "You should ice this," he said quietly. "And take it easy for a few days." "Can't. We need to finish Lyra's repairs." "Elena." "I'm fine, Marcus." He was standing very close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, could smell the salt water still clinging to his skin. Close enough that when he reached up to brush a strand of wet hair from her face, she felt the touch like an electric current. "Why do you always push yourself so hard?" he asked softly. "Because if I don't, someone might think I'm not good enough. Someone might think I don't deserve to be here." Understanding dawned in his expression. "Is that what you thought? All those years ago, when I challenged your thesis? What else was I supposed to think?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I challenged you because you were the only person in that program who was my intellectual equal. The only one who pushed me to be better. And I was terrified that if you succeeded, which I knew you would, you'd leave and I'd never see you again." Elena's breath caught. "Marcus. I was an idiot. I pushed you away because I didn't know how to tell you that I admired you. That I..." He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. That I had feelings for you I didn't know how to handle. The air between them felt charged, heavy with years of unspoken tension. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. You had a terrible way of showing it, she whispered. I know. I'm sorry. For all of it. His hand was still touching her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Can we start over? Can we try being something other than rivals? Elena knew she should be cautious, should protect herself. But the way Marcus was looking at her, the vulnerability in his eyes, made her walls crumble. I'd like that, she said. Marcus leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he closed the distance and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both afraid this fragile new thing between them might shatter. But then Elena's hands found his shoulders, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened into something that tasted of salt water and second chances. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since graduate school, he admitted. Then why did it take you so long? Because I'm an idiot. We've established this. Elena laughed, the sound surprising them both. For the first time in years, being near Marcus felt easy. Natural. Like coming home. They returned to the lab hand in hand, and Lyra took one look at them and smiled her otherworldly smile. Finally, she said. I was beginning to think humans were far less intelligent than my research suggested.